After I was done unboxing the S24, one of the first things I did was take it outside. I wanted to see if, like the S23, its color would change. It did. If you watched this video, then you might remember I named the S23 the best designed smartphone for under 100k. I did that primarily because of its color changing ability. So, since they retained that same feature on the S24, I guess it's safe to say Itel is winning it again this year. Design didn't change much. We get a circular camera module like last time, but this time the module is much bigger, and there's a gold ring around it. We also get some Itel branding, except this time it says designed by Itel in small text and then super in bold. This year we get 3 colors, black, blue, and of course, white. They all look good in their own way, but note that if you want that color changing effect, you would have to go with the white one. Ports and buttons are also the same as on the S23. We have the side-mounted fingerprint sensor on the right, which works fine. The volume buttons are just above it. There's also the headphone jack, the microphone, and the Type-C port, all at the bottom. Fun fact, or not so fun fact, even though the headphone jack is present here, in the box of the S24, there are no wired earphones. We got wired earphones with the S23, but now they've been removed. But thankfully, that's the only thing they removed, because we still get all the other accessories: a phone case, a charging adapter, and a charging cable. But yeah, back to the tour. You notice on the S24 that there's a speaker grill at the bottom and also at the top. So on the S24, we get dual speakers. This is a first for an Itel S series device. To the left of the phone, there's the SIM and SD card tray. It's a regular dual SIM tray, so it can hold 2 SIM cards and 1 SD card. Nice. So you know how I earlier mentioned giving the Best Design Award to the S23? Well, some people disagreed. They argue that the S23 shouldn't have won because it had an ugly V-shaped notch. Well, with the S24, they listened. I guess Itel really wanted to win the award again this year. The S24 comes with a hole punch cutout, finally. The bezels though are still huge, especially that chin, but at least the top of the phone looks much better now. But aside the notch, I don't think the display changed. This is still a 720p 90Hz LCD display, which for its price category is okay. I've heard some people say that they would rather have a 1080p 60Hz display than this, but for me, I'd actually rather have a 720p 60Hz AMOLED display. But that's just me. What about you? But yeah, if we focus on what we get with the S24, this is fine. The display is basically actually the same as the P55 Plus. I mean, for a $100 smartphone, it's decently sharp and has decent colors. It's not super vibrant, it's not super detailed, it's fine. You can't really complain. One thing people tend to complain about with the Itel S series though is their processor of choice. For a while, Itel has used Unisoc chipsets, which honestly have been fine, but because it's not a very popular brand, I've seen people asking why they don't use MediaTek processors, for example. Well, with the S24, they did use a MediaTek processor. It's the Helio G91. The G91 is a super new chipset. I believe it was released in February of 2024. It's an SoC designed for entry-level 4G smartphones and is comparable to the Helio G88 and G85. So no doubt it's a step up from the Unisoc processor they used last year, but I would say it's not a night and day difference. This performs somewhat similarly to the S23. It manages simple tasks decently well. It starts at 4 gigs of RAM, but I'll recommend getting at least the 8GB 128GB variant, because the more RAM and storage you have, the better your experience would be. For me, it's been okay. Like I said, not a night and day difference. It still feels pretty similar to the S23. Apps open quickly, but not so quickly. You can multitask, have multiple apps open, but if you leave them open for a while, they might have to restart. And then for gaming, I mean, for an entry-level smartphone, it actually did really well. When I played Asphalt 9, the gameplay was smooth most of the time. You would notice some occasional drop frames, but then for this price point, you can't really complain. I would say this isn't a gaming phone, but it can definitely play games. Performance is really alright, but people just need to remember that this is an entry-level budget phone, so they need to have reasonable expectations. The S24 comes with a 108 megapixel main camera. That's a huge jump from the 50 megapixel we had last year, more than 2 times. Well, it might not be 2 times better, but it definitely is better. By default, you'd be taking photos in the regular mode, which is 12 megapixels, but if you want that extra detail, you'd have to switch to the 108 megapixel mode. But I think most people shoot in the regular mode, so I did too. For my tests, the images came out really nice, about 7 or 8 times out of 10. In some photos, they were spot on. The color, the details, skin tone, HDR, everything was spot on. But then some other times, it didn't do so well. Sometimes it looked a bit oversaturated. So I would say the cameras are pretty good, but they're not consistent. For video, it can shoot up to 2K 30 FPS on both the main and selfie camera, but in that mode, you wouldn't be getting any form of stabilization. To use super steady mode, you would have to trickle down to 1080p, which honestly is still fine. Under favorable lighting conditions, the cameras do decently well. But what do you guys think? Battery life is also decent on here. It has a 5000 mAh battery that lasts for about 12 hours when streaming content, and about 5 to maybe 6 when gaming. So for casual users, this would last an entire day. But if you're a heavy user, you're going to need to charge before the end of the day. The somewhat good news is we have faster charging this time. I believe it was 10 watts on the S23, but now it's 18 watts. 18 isn't crazy fast, it would take like 2 hours to fully charge, but at least it's faster. And they also give you the charger in the box for free. The Itel S24 starts at around $90, but like I said earlier in the video, you should go for at least the 8GB 128GB variant, which would cost you $110 or 143,600 naira. It's unfortunate that 150k is now the price of a budget phone, but putting that to the side, I think the Itel S24 for this budget category does really well. It has a couple features that makes it stand out, like the 108 megapixel camera. You don't see that really at this price point. But I would add that it still needs to be tweaked to be more consistent. The processor as well stands out. It's not a gaming phone, but it can play games. And then there's a whole color changing thing. It's a really interesting phone. I think if you're looking for a budget phone to get your kids or even yourself, this is definitely one you should consider. That's my review of the Itel S24. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.